The Nexus station hung like a jewel in the void, where 1,000 species traded everything except hope. In its lowest tier, a human man sat with a battered guitar, playing songs for a daughter who couldn't cry the way her mother once had. When the Empress of Valorn passed the observation deck and heard 6 strings humming a lullaby older than starlight, something inside her imperial chest cracked like ice under sudden weight. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is even more unbelievable than this one. The observation deck stretched wide as a cathedral, its glass walls opening onto the infinite dark where stars burned like distant campfires. The Nexus station orbited nothing, anchored only by treaty and the collective exhaustion of species too weary to wage another war. Diplomats in jeweled carapaces walked its corridors. Traders with too many eyes haggled over resources humanity had never named. And in the corner of Deck 17, where the lighting stuttered and the gravity felt half a step too heavy, Daniel Ward sat cross-legged with his daughter and played. The guitar was older than his marriage, older than the war. Its wood had cracked twice, been glued with resin that smelled like pine and regret, and bore the scars of a dozen worlds he wished he'd never seen. The strings hummed under his calloused fingers, not loud, not performance, just presence, a melody that moved like water over stone, patient and persistent. Kira sat before him, knees drawn to her chest, her skin the pale blue of winter mornings. Her eyes, too large for a human face, watched his hands with the intensity of someone memorizing a spell. She was 7 years old in Earth years, though her species aged differently. Her mother's species. The Lissari aged like moonlight, slow and silver, until one day they simply weren't. Her mother wasn't anymore. Daniel didn't sing. Not yet. He let the chords breathe first, let them settle into the recycled air like dust finding its place after a storm. Around them, the station hummed its mechanical lullaby. Footsteps echoed. Voices barked in languages his translator chip couldn't pass. No one looked at them. A human with a half-breed child, sitting on the floor with an acoustic guitar, was the kind of tragedy people stepped around without comment. Kira's fingers twitched. She wanted to touch the guitar but never did without asking. Politeness her mother had taught her, the Lissari way, where every gesture carried weight and every silence had a name. "Can I?" she whispered. Daniel shifted the guitar slightly, angling it so her small hand could rest on its body. She pressed her palm flat against the wood, feeling the vibration travel through her bones. Her face, so alien and so familiar, softened into something close to peace. He played the chorus, the one her mother used to hum while cooking, while braiding Kira's hair, while standing at the viewport watching ships depart for wars she prayed would end. It was a song from Earth, from a time before colonies and treaties, when humans still believed the stars would save them. Kira closed her eyes. Her lips moved, shaping words in a language that had no translation, only feeling. Daniel watched her and felt the weight of every choice that had led them here. To this deck, to this moment, to a life measured in borrowed time and the space between notes. The guitar sang. Kira breathed. And somewhere above them, footsteps slowed. The Empress had arrived. They had been on the Nexus for 3 months, which in station time felt like 3 years. Time moved differently when you were waiting for something that might never come. Daniel worked the maintenance shifts, crawling through ducts that smelled like burnt wiring and alien sweat, fixing things that broke because nothing in space was built to last. He earned enough credits to rent a quarters the size of a closet, where Kira slept curled against the wall, and he sat awake watching her breathe. The Lissari didn't sleep like humans. They drifted, half in dream, half in memory, their consciousness sliding between worlds. Kira had inherited that. Sometimes she would open her eyes in the middle of the night and stare at nothing, seeing things Daniel couldn't, hearing voices he would never know. He wondered if she saw her mother in those moments. If Elara came to her in the in-between places where grief and love tangled like roots. Elara had died on Dust's edge, a moon with no name that mattered, during a medical supply run that turned into an ambush. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong species caught in a war that had nothing to do with mercy. Daniel had been off-world, working a contract he thought would fund their escape from the outer colonies. By the time he got back, there was only Kira, sitting in the ruins of their prefab home, holding her mother's scarf and humming. She hadn't spoken for 2 weeks after that. Not a word, not a sound. The grief counselors, the ones who cycled through refugee stations with their neural scanners and platitudes, said she was processing trauma in the Lissari way, that she needed time, that hybrid children carried pain in both halves of their blood. What brought her back wasn't therapy. It was the guitar. Daniel had pulled it from storage, a relic from his own father, a man who died before Daniel learned to play properly. He'd sat in the cramped quarters, fumbling through chords he half remembered, and Kira had lifted her head. Her eyes had focused, and she had crawled across the floor to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. He played, she listened, and slowly, word by careful word, she came back. Now, 3 months later, she spoke in full sentences. She laughed sometimes, a sound like wind chimes. She asked questions about Earth, about her mother, about why the stars didn't sing the way Lissari legends promised. And every evening, when his shift ended and the station lights dimmed to simulate night, they came to Deck 17. No one bothered them here. The observation deck was a forgotten corner, a place where the desperate and the discarded gathered to stare at the void and pretend they weren't afraid. Daniel had learned the schedule. He knew when the cleaning drones passed, when the patrols cycled through, when they had 30 uninterrupted minutes before someone told them to move along. 30 minutes. That's all they ever needed. Daniel adjusted his grip on the guitar's neck, his thumb pressing against the worn fret markers. Kira had asked for this song, the slow one. The one Elara used to sing when storms rolled across dust's edge and the prefab walls shook like paper. It didn't have a name in any language. It was just theirs. He began to play, fingers finding the melody, like muscle memory, like prayer. Kira leaned forward, her blue skin catching the starlight filtering through the observation glass. Her lips parted. She was about to sing. And then the air changed. The Empress of Valorn did not walk like other beings. She moved as if gravity had made an exception, as if the station itself bent slightly to acknowledge her passage. Her entourage followed at a distance, advisors and guards in ceremonial armor that gleamed like oil on water. They whispered into devices, tracking schedules, monitoring threats, ensuring that the galaxy's most powerful woman never encountered anything unplanned. But she had stopped. Deck 17 was not on the itinerary. It was a maintenance level, a forgotten artery where the station's elegance gave way to function. The Empress had been walking to the summit chamber, where 12 species waited to negotiate mining rights in the outer veil, talks that would shape the next century of galactic commerce. She had heard the guitar through the wall. Her name was Siavra Kell, though most knew her only as the Empress. She had ruled Valorn for 16 cycles, had turned a fractured system into an empire that made others whisper her name with equal parts fear and respect. She had negotiated treaties at gunpoint and hosted feasts where enemies became allies or corpses. She did not stop for street musicians or sentiment, but she had stopped. The sound threaded through the steel and polymers, faint but insistent, a melody that didn't belong in this place of cold negotiations and colder stars. It moved like a memory she didn't recognize, tugging at something beneath her ribs. Her lead advisor, Torvash, a Krell with mandibles that clicked impatience, leaned close. "Empress, the delegates are waiting." Siavra raised one hand. Silence. Her eyes tracked the sound to its source. She turned from the main corridor and stepped through an archway marked with faded warning symbols. Deck 17 opened before her. The observation glass stretched across the far wall, spilling starlight across scuffed floors and exposed conduits. And there, in the corner, beneath a flickering panel, sat a human man, with a guitar and a child who glowed faintly blue. Her entourage tensed. Hands moved toward weapons. She ignored them. The man played with his eyes half closed, fingers moving across strings that hummed like a voice trying to remember language. His face carried the geography of loss, lines etched deep around his eyes and mouth. He wore a maintenance uniform, the kind that marked him as labor, as background, as dismissed. The child sat cross-legged before him, hands resting on her knees. Lysary's stillness. The meditation of a species that had been wiped from 4 systems during the Consolidation Wars. A species Veylorn had failed to protect. The girl's eyes were closed. Her lips moved soundlessly. Siavra took 3 steps closer. Her guards shifted, but she waved them back. She stood at the edge of the scene, not interrupting, simply present. The human's fingers slowed. The melody descended into something softer, like a hand gently closing a door. The girl swayed, caught in the current. And then the human began to sing. His voice was not trained. It cracked in places, rough with disuse or grief or both. But it carried the song with a tenderness that made the air feel heavier. The words were in Old Terran, but meaning wasn't in the words. It was in the way. His voice wrapped around the child. Siavra's chest tightened. She had not heard a lullaby in 23 years. The human finished the verse. The child opened her eyes. "Can you sing it slower this time?" Daniel's hands stilled on the fretboard. He looked at his daughter, at the way her blue skin caught the starlight, at the hope written in eyes too large and too knowing. Slower. She wanted it slower because slower meant it lasted longer. Slower meant she could hold each note like a physical thing, wrap herself in it, pretend for just a moment that her mother was still humming in the next room. He nodded. "Okay, sweetheart. Slower." He repositioned, his fingers finding the opening chord again. This time he let each string ring fully before moving to the next, stretching the spaces between notes until the silence became part of the song. The melody unfolded like a flower opening in time-lapse, deliberate and fragile. Kira closed her eyes again. Her breathing synchronized with the rhythm, her small chest rising and falling in time with the music. Her lips began to move, whispering the Lysari words Ilara had taught her, words that meant moonwalker and heartkeeper, and things that had no translation in any human tongue. Daniel watched her and felt the familiar ache settle behind his sternum. This guitar had been his father's, a man he'd barely known, who'd left when Daniel was 9 and died before they could reconcile. The only thing he'd left behind was this instrument and a note that said, "Make something beautiful." For years, it had sat in storage, a relic of abandonment, until Kira needed it, until beauty was the only language grief understood. The station hummed around them, indifferent machinery, processing air and water and waste, keeping thousands of lives suspended in the void. Through the observation glass, a transport ship drifted past, its running lights blinking in slow Morse code. Daniel played and thought about all the ships they'd watched leave, all the destinations they couldn't afford, all the futures that existed somewhere beyond this deck, beyond this moment, beyond reach. Kira's voice joined his playing, soft and tentative. She sang in Lysari, the words climbing and falling like birds learning to fly. Her mother's voice had been stronger, fuller, capable of filling rooms and hearts simultaneously. Kira's was still finding itself, still learning what shape grief takes when you're 7 and half of your heritage has been erased from the galaxy. Daniel's fingers found the bridge of the song, the part where the melody lifted before settling back down. He slowed it even more, stretching time like taffy, giving Kira every second she needed. His calluses caught slightly on the strings, producing a whisper of friction that somehow made the music more honest. Behind them, unnoticed, the Empress stood perfectly still. Her advisors had fallen silent, their urgency dissolving in the face of something they couldn't categorize or rush. Torvash opened his mandibles to speak, then closed them. Even he could feel the weight of what was happening, though he lacked the language to name it. The song moved through its verses like water, finding the path of least resistance. Daniel sang the chorus, his voice wrapping around Kira's like a blanket. And in that moment, the universe contracted to 6 strings and 2 voices, and the space where love refuses to let go. Elara had sung this song on their wedding day. Not during the ceremony, which had been brief and bureaucratic, processed through a colonial registrar who'd barely looked up from his datapad. But after, in their quarters on Dust's Edge, when it was just the 2 of them and the wind howling against the prefab walls. She had hummed it while unpacking their few belongings, while hanging curtains made from recycled solar sail material, while building a life from spare parts and stubborn hope. Daniel had asked what the song meant. Elara had smiled, that small knowing smile that meant some things didn't translate. "It's what we sing when we choose someone," she'd said. "Not when we fall. When we decide to stay fallen." He hadn't understood then. He'd been young, 24, and stupid with optimism, believing that love was the hard part and everything after would be easier. He'd learned. The galaxy had taught him in slow, brutal lessons that choosing someone was just the beginning. Staying chosen, staying present, when the universe pulled in 1,000 directions, that was the work. Kira had been born during a meteor shower. Elara had labored for 18 hours while rocks burned overhead, streaking the sky with lines of fire. The medical unit's generator had failed twice. Daniel had held his wife's hand and felt more helpless than he'd ever felt in his life, watching her body do impossible things while he could only bear witness. When Kira finally arrived, tiny and blue and screaming, Elara had wept. Not from pain, from recognition. "She has my mother's eyes," she'd whispered. "The galaxy gave her back to me. 3 years later, the galaxy took them both away. Not Kira. Kira survived because she'd been at a neighbor's quarters, playing with children whose names Daniel couldn't remember now. But Elara had been home when the raid came. Wrong place. Wrong time. Wrong species in a war that painted entire peoples with a single brush. They'd told him it was quick, as if that mattered, as if quick made it less permanent. This song was all he had left of her voice. The melody she'd hummed while braiding Kira's hair, while cooking meals that smelled like spices from a world he'd never seen, while standing at the viewport watching ships leave for wars she'd hoped would end. He'd learned to play it by memory, by the ghost of her humming that lived in his bones. Now, he played it for Kira. Slower, because she'd asked. Slower, because it was the only way to make time stop being an enemy. His fingers moved across the strings with a tenderness that bordered on prayer, coaxing out each note as if it were fragile, as if it might break under too much pressure. Kira sang the second verse, her voice thin but true. The Lysari words spilled from her like water from cupped hands, precious and impossible to hold. Daniel's throat tightened. He kept playing, kept breathing, kept choosing to stay fallen. Behind them, the Empress felt something crack inside her chest, clean as a fault line. Siavra had not cried in 16 years. Tears were a luxury empires could not afford. She had learned to convert grief into strategy, pain into policy, loss into the cold mathematics of survival. When her daughter Thera had stopped singing, stopped laughing, stopped being anything except a perfect heir shaped by tutors and protocol, Siavra had told herself it was necessary. The galaxy demanded strength. Softness was a wound that enemies would exploit. She had believed that. Built an empire on that belief. Now she stood on a forgotten deck watching a human man play a battered guitar for a hybrid child, and something in her chest fractured like ice under sudden weight. The song was simple, unsophisticated. The human's voice cracked in places, his technique flawed by any conservatory standard. But the way he looked at his daughter, the way his hands moved with a tenderness that bordered on worship, the way the girl leaned into the music as if it were the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. Siavra knew that lean. She had seen it once in her own daughter's face, before the war, before the assassinations, before everything soft had been surgically removed from their lives in the name of security. Thera was 19 now. She sat through council meetings with perfect posture. She negotiated trade agreements with the efficiency of a machine. She called Siavra Empress in public and mother only when protocol demanded. They lived in the same palace and occupied different universes. When had that happened? When had the distance become a chasm? Siavra remembered the last time Thera had asked for a song. She'd been 6, maybe 7, small enough to fit in Siavra's lap. A thunderstorm had shaken the palace, and Thera had run to her mother's chambers, afraid of the lightning. Siavra had been in a war council meeting, projected into 3 dimensions across her desk. She'd waved Thera away. "Not now, little one. The advisors are waiting." Thera had left. She had never asked again. 16 years of perfect behavior. 16 years of molding a child into an heir. 16 years of telling herself it was necessary. That love was a luxury. That empires were built on sacrifice. And here, on a maintenance deck, a man with nothing played a song for a girl who had lost everything, and they had more than Siavra's empire had ever given her. The human reached the chorus again. His voice softened, wrapping around the child like a blanket. The girl's hands moved slightly, tracing patterns in the air, following melodies only she could see. Her face held an expression Siavra had not seen in Thera's eyes for a decade. Peace, simple, uncomplicated peace. Torvash shifted behind her, mandibles clicking impatience. The delegates were waiting. The summit would collapse without her presence. Trillions of credits hung in the balance. The fate of mining colonies, trade routes, political alliances. Siavra raised her hand again. Silence. She was not finished listening. The song swelled, then softened. The girl whispered something Siavra couldn't hear, and the human smiled with his whole broken heart. Daniel finished the verse and let the final chord ring out, fading into the ambient hum of the station. His fingers hovered above the strings, waiting. Kira always needed a moment between verses, a breath to gather herself before the next wave of memory and music. She opened her eyes. They shimmered with something that wasn't quite tears. Lissari didn't cry the way humans did. Their grief expressed itself differently, in bioluminescent patterns that flickered across their skin like coded messages. Kira's cheeks pulsed faintly, soft blue light that spelled sorrow in a language Daniel had learned to read. "Again?" he asked gently. Kira shook her head. Her small hand reached out, fingers hovering over the guitar strings without touching. "Can you sing it slower this time?" she whispered. "So slow I can hear every word. Like Mama used to, when she wanted me to remember." Daniel's heart clenched. Ilara had done that. Near the end, when she'd sensed something coming, some premonition her species carried like a sixth sense. She had sung everything slowly, teaching Kira the words, the cadences, the melodies that carried their history, as if she'd known she was running out of time to pass things down. "Okay, sweetheart," Daniel said, his voice rough. "As slow as you need." He repositioned his hands on the fretboard. This time he would stretch each note to its breaking point, would make every word a small eternity. If Kira needed to hold on to this song, he would give her every second of it. Behind them, Siavra took a single step forward. Her boot made no sound on the deck plating, but the movement drew Torvash's attention. He reached for her arm, a breach of protocol born from desperation. "Empress, we must." She turned her head slightly. The look she gave him could have frozen stars. He withdrew his hand as if burned. Siavra's eyes returned to the human and his daughter. She watched the way he adjusted his grip, the care with which he prepared to play. She saw the devotion in his posture, the love written in every line of his weathered face. This man, who had nothing, who worked maintenance shifts in a station's forgotten corners, who had lost his wife and nearly lost his daughter to a galaxy that ground people into dust. He had kept singing anyway. When had Siavra stopped singing to Thera? When had duty devoured tenderness? When had the empire she built to protect her daughter become the wall that separated them? The human's fingers touched the strings. The first note emerged, stretched thin and achingly beautiful. Slow, so slow that each vibration felt like a heartbeat, like the pulse of something alive and fragile. The girl closed her eyes. Her lips began to move, forming words in time with her father's playing. And Siavra understood, with a clarity that hurt, that she was not watching a performance. She was witnessing what love looked like when everything else had been stripped away, raw, essential, the only thing that mattered. The song began again, slower than time itself. The melody unfolded like a prayer, spoken by someone who had forgotten how to believe but remembered the words anyway. Daniel's fingers pressed into the strings with a gentleness that bordered on reverence, each note given room to breathe, to exist fully before the next one arrived. The guitar sang in whispers, in echoes, in the spaces between sound where meaning lived. Kira's voice rose to meet it, thin as spider silk, strong as steel cable. She sang the Lysari verses, the ones about moonwalkers and star weavers, about mothers who teach their daughters to navigate by constellations that only exist in memory. Her small hands moved in gestures Daniel had seen Elara make, fingers tracing patterns in the air that mapped something invisible, something sacred. He watched her and felt the weight of what he carried. This song, this child, this responsibility to keep alive a culture that the galaxy had tried to erase. Elara's people had been scattered across a dozen systems, their homeworld glassed during the consolidation, wars, their language banned in 3 sectors for the crime of being spoken by the losing side. But here, on this deck, in this moment, the Lysari lived, in Kira's voice, in the words she shaped with a tongue that was half human, half something the universe had tried to silence. Daniel sang the chorus, stretching each syllable until it became something larger than language. His voice wrapped around Kira's, human and alien, harmonizing in a way that shouldn't work but did. They sang about holding on, about choosing to remember, about love that refuses to become ash even when everything else burns. Behind them, Siavra's breathing had changed. Her advisors noticed, but said nothing. The Empress stood with her shoulders pulled back, her chin lifted, her posture perfect as always. But her hands, hidden in the folds of her robes, trembled. She thought of Thera, of a small girl who used to beg for songs before bed, of a daughter who had learned to stop asking because the answer was always the same. Not now. Later. Tomorrow. When the crisis passes. When the war ends. When the empire stabilizes. Tomorrow had turned into 16 years. The human and his daughter reached the final verse. He slowed even further, impossibly, stretching time like a substance that could be pulled and shaped. Each word hung in the air long enough to be felt, to be absorbed, to change the composition of whoever heard it. Kira's voice cracked on the last line, emotion fracturing her control. Daniel's playing didn't waver. He held the space for her grief, his guitar steady beneath her breaking, supporting without smothering, present without demanding. The final note faded. Silence rushed in like water filling a void. Kira opened her eyes and looked at her father. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered. Daniel set the guitar down gently and opened his arms. She collapsed into them, small and shaking, and he held her while the stars beyond the observation glass continued their ancient, indifferent dance. And Siavra broke. The sound that escaped Siavra's throat was small, almost nothing, a catch of breath that could have been mistaken for a cough or a sigh. But Torvash heard it. His mandibles froze mid-click. His compound eyes widened in something approaching horror. The Empress was crying, not visibly, not in any way her enemies could exploit or her subjects could witness. But her chest hitched once, twice, and her hands, hidden in her robes, clenched into fists so tight her knuckles went pale beneath the iridescent scales that marked Valorn royalty. She had built an empire on the principle that emotion was weakness, that leaders who felt too deeply made decisions that cost lives, that the galaxy respected only strength, only certainty, only the iron will to do what was necessary regardless of cost. And she had been right, hadn't she? Valorn thrived. Its citizens lived in safety, its borders held against threats that would have consumed softer nations. She had sacrificed her softness to build something that would outlast her, something that would protect Thera long after Siavra was dust. But watching this human hold his daughter, watching him give her the one thing he had left to give, a song, a moment, his full and undivided presence, Siavra understood what she had actually built. A prison, beautiful, secure, empty. Daniel rocked Kira gently, the way he'd done when she was an infant screaming against the foreign air of Dust's Edge. He hummed the melody now, no words, just the tune continuing like a heartbeat. Kira's small hands gripped his maintenance uniform, her face pressed against his shoulder. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed in waves, grief and love and exhaustion painting her skin in languages older than speech. "I miss her, Papa," Kira whispered against his chest. "I miss her so much. I know, baby, I know." Daniel's voice cracked. He didn't try to hide it. "I miss her too. Does it stop hurting?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. The station hummed, and around them, somewhere far above, delegates argued about mineral rights and trade routes, about things that felt important until you were holding your daughter while she grieved. "No," he said finally. "It doesn't stop. But it changes. It becomes something you can carry, instead of something that buries you." Kira nodded against his shoulder. She didn't pull away. She stayed there, held and holding, while the universe continued without them. Siavra watched. The fracture in her chest widened. She thought of Thera sitting in council meetings with perfect posture. Thought of her daughter's face smoothed of all expression. Thought of how she'd praised that emptiness as maturity, as readiness to rule. She had taught Thera to carry everything. She had never taught her it was okay to be carried. The human kissed the top of his daughter's head. His eyes were wet. He didn't apologize for it. And Siavra made a decision that would change 3 lives and possibly an empire. She stepped forward and into the light. Daniel felt the presence before he saw her. A shift in the air, a weight that had nothing to do with mass and everything to do with authority. He looked up, still holding Kira, and found himself staring at a woman who could only be royalty. Her robes shimmered with colors that had no names in human languages. Her crown, delicate as frost and sharp as intent, caught the starlight and bent it into new geometries. Kira tensed in his arms. She knew power when she saw it. The galaxy had taught her that lesson early and often. The Empress stood 3 meters away, her entourage frozen behind her like a painting of courtly attendants. She looked at Daniel, then at Kira, then at the guitar resting on the deck plating. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who commanded fleets but chose, in this moment, to ask, "How long have you been playing for her?" Daniel's throat tightened. This was not a conversation he'd expected to have, not here, not with someone whose decisions shaped star systems. Since her mother died, 3 months now. Every day we can, when my shifts allow. The Empress nodded slowly. Her eyes, dark and depthless, studied them with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in years. "I have a daughter," she said. The words came out careful, as if she were testing their weight. 19 years old. I have not sung to her since she was 6. The confession hung in the recycled air. Behind her, Torvash's mandibles clicked once in shock, before falling silent. Daniel didn't know what to say. What do you tell an Empress about parenting? What could a maintenance worker possibly offer someone who held the fate of billions in her hands? Kira, still pressed against his chest, spoke instead. Her voice was small but clear. "It's not too late," she said. "Mama always said it's never too late to start singing again." The Empress's composure wavered. For just a heartbeat, the imperial mask slipped, and underneath it was a mother who had forgotten how to hold her child without armor between them. "Your mother was wise," Siavra said softly. "She was," Daniel agreed. His hand moved unconsciously to Kira's back, rubbing small circles the way Elara used to. "She taught us that the songs matter, that they're how we remember who we are when everything else gets taken away." Siavra looked at the guitar, at this man who had nothing but gave everything, at this child who glowed with grief and love in equal measure. She thought of Thera, of council meetings and state dinners, of a daughter trained to rule but never taught to rest. "May I ask," Siavra said, "what the song is called?" Daniel smiled, sad and true. "It doesn't have a name," Elara said. "The best songs never do. They're just what you sing when words aren't enough." The Empress closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had shifted. A decision made. A bridge burned. A new path chosen. "Thank you," she said. Then, turning to her entourage, her voice carried the command that had shaped an empire. "Cancel the summit. Reschedule everything for tomorrow. I have somewhere I need to be." Torvash sputtered. "Empress, the delegates will wait." Her tone allowed no argument. "Or they won't. Either way, I'm going home to my daughter, and I'm going to ask her if she remembers any of the songs I used to sing." She looked back at Daniel and Kira one last time. "Some things can't wait for tomorrow. I forgot that. Thank you for reminding me." She turned and walked away, her entourage scrambling to follow, her robes trailing like comet tails. Daniel held Kira as they watched the Empress disappear down the corridor. Around them, the station continued its mechanical heartbeat, indifferent to the small revolution that had just occurred. Kira looked up at her father. "Do you think she'll really sing to her?" Daniel picked up the guitar, checking the tuning out of habit. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I think she's going to try. That's what Mama would say. Matters most. The trying." "Yeah." Daniel's voice was thick. "That's exactly what she'd say." They sat in comfortable silence, watching ships drift past the observation glass like wandering stars. Eventually, Daniel started playing again. Not the lullaby this time. Something else. Something that sounded like hope tastes when you've almost forgotten its flavor. Kira rested her head against his shoulder and hummed along. Somewhere in the palace district, an empress opened the door to her daughter's chambers without knocking, without announcement, without the weight of empire in her posture. Just a mother, nervous and hopeful, carrying a question that should have been asked years ago. "Thera," Siavra said softly, "do you remember the storm song? The one I used to sing when you were small?" Thera looked up from her datapad, confusion flickering across her carefully composed face. "Mother? I was wondering," Siavra continued, her voice shaking with something that wasn't quite courage but was trying to become it. "If you'd like me to sing it again, slower this time, so you can remember." And in the space between question and answer, an empire discovered it had been holding its breath,